afternoon. Welcome to our I Am Speaker series. I'm Robert Pleasant, Director of Student Services here at the Southern Campus, and we want to welcome you to this series. This is an informal conversation that we have. We have this. We try to do at least twice a semester. And it's a way for us to introduce ourselves to one another, but also to hear the journeys of others to hopefully inspire our students and our community members. It has taken this whole process, this whole I Am Speaker series began with a quote by Dr. King, and I'm going to read that. He says, "I am convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other, and they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other." And that was in 1962. So the I Am Speaker series provides an opportunity for us to learn and understand each other. Our stories, our experiences are unique and important. By sharing them, we break down barriers that divide us. No matter what labels are assigned to us and no matter what ideals we may hold, we are all a shared humanity that is, as Dr. King said, tied to a single garment of destiny. So, Dr. Shytle, I will turn it over to you. We don't do a formal introduction. You know this. I just want everyone else to know we don't do a formal introduction because the whole idea of the speaker series is for us to learn directly from you. So welcome, everyone, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Shytle.
Thank you, Robert. First, I'm so excited to see two of my former students. I guess they're both at Big Brothers Big Sisters, and so they're popped in. So that makes me happy. Welcome, guys. So I have to tell you that I've spent an awful lot of time trying to figure out what I'm going to say, and I've written stuff down, and then I've decided not to write stuff down, and then I looked at PowerPoints, and so I think I'm just going to let the story come out as best narrative as I can make it. And then I'm pulling up some of my research to show you guys what I actually came up with, because my dissertation was based on my childhood experiences. And so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Joy Shytle. I am an associate professor of instruction of social work and the field liaison on the Southern Campus at Ohio University. And I've been here since 2014, so almost 9 years. Does that sound right? Am I doing the math right? 6, 8. Yeah, almost 9 years. And I have the best job. I get to hang out with students and I get to work with community members. And I was able to work on my dissertation, my PhD, and get that. I conferred that last year. So I'm happy to kind of share some of this, although I'm super reluctant to share it too, because I've never actually, other than what I've written, I haven't really shared this story. And I intentionally didn't really invite my mom because it upsets her, because she feels responsible for stuff, which I absolutely don't feel responsible for, but you'll understand here in a minute. So the story starts as a second grader at Oakview Elementary in Ashland, Kentucky. And I was tested gifted. And so, this is in like 1983, right? So in 1983, little girls were supposed to be good little girls and sit in the classroom. And I was I was a mess, I wasn't organized. But here's this piece of paper that says I'm super smart. So they put me in this program called ALP, Advanced Learning Program. And once a week, they would bus us to Crab Elementary, which we all thought was fantastic because their playground was the park. But we were in a trailer for what was considered a gifted and talented classes. So, so this is in second grade. So during this time, I start to really struggle. I think I struggled before, but this is when I start to notice that I struggled, because my family now has this piece of paper that says Joy's gifted. She should be able to do all of these wonderful things. She's, she tested high and all of these things. And so why is she not doing well in the classroom? Well, so what happened was we now know ADD. But, in the 80s, girls didn't have ADD. Little boys had ADHD, but nobody knew little girls could have it too. And it manifests very differently because you don't see that hyperactivity. But we didn't know this until I was in graduate school. So setting the scene, I am second grade and I'm being told, you should be able to do better. You're just being lazy. And I hope nobody's had these experiences, but I suspect that it's happened to a lot of us. That if I just applied myself, I could do better. If I would just pay attention, I could do better and I could be better. And so this is the narrative that I'm getting in second and third grade. Well, at the end of third grade, I got pulled out of ALP. Now, I thought as a third grader that I got dismissed. Like I thought they fired me from ALP. I thought I flunked out of ALP. Nobody ever told me until I'm talking to my parents about my dissertation topic at the age of 46 that they pulled me out because they didn't think I was getting anything out of it. So here at this point, I've got maybe 35, 40 years of this thought that people said I was gifted, but I wasn't doing well. So I wasn't even good enough to be in the ALP program. So this is, and so, but that gifted label never went away. So I'm going through high school, middle school, high school. I'm just kind of a hot mess because everybody just thinks that I can't get organized. I can't seem to settle on things. If you guys have ever been familiar with what's called executive functioning skills, that's when you have ADHD or ADD or autism, those are things that are often compromised, and that's organization, and that's planning and starting things or stopping things. So if you've ever seen a kid that hyper focuses, that like gets started on something and then doesn't want to stop, that's a good thing when you're writing a dissertation, but it's not a good thing when you're like playing out on the streets and you don't want to come home, or you get into a book. I was really big into reading. At one point, my parents, this is why my mom thinks like my parents did the best that they could. I swear they were fantastic parents and I do not blame them for anything, but they were doing what they were told to help me focus. So don't let her read as much. So they were taking away my books that I loved to read so much because I needed to focus on schoolwork. And then once I got my schoolwork done, then I could read, but I couldn't focus long enough. I can remember writing out a page. I mean, I was probably fourth grade at this point, and I was writing something out, and I had to write it out 3 or 4 times because I kept getting distracted and I'd miss maybe one word. And then my dad would make me write it over again. And so they were doing what they were told, but the message that I'm getting is, I'm just not paying attention. I'm just working too fast. I just want to do other things. I can't focus, but I should be able to because I've been told I was gifted. So go to Center College. I do well enough in school to go to Center College. Now, the impetus behind that isn't necessarily work ethic. It is more about the fact that I wanted to prove people wrong. I'm one of those people that if you tell me I can't do it, I'm going to do it. And so I think by sheer will, did everything that I could do. And I fought tooth and nail, step by step, to be able to navigate, even in high school and definitely in college, a world where I was working at a deficit, but I didn't know, because my internal system is saying, I'm just not working hard enough, because that's what everybody's been telling me my whole life. I'm just not working hard enough. And so I'm doing everything I think I need to do. And then I decide to go, I was going to be a therapist, like go to psychology. I decided I didn't want to sit down all day. So I decided social work would be a more hands-on kind of thing, which it totally is. But even my students can tell you, I am so happy to be the one that's up walking around at the front of the classroom because I don't sit still well at all. And I'm trying to make sure I don't miss anything. I made a couple of notes. I made it through Center, and I went to, Center College is a small liberal arts school in in Danville, Kentucky, which is really good because I was able to get some individual attention. My daughter's at UK, she has 500 people in her calculus class, and thrives in it. She's the best of the worst parts of me. Does that make sense? Like she really, she does really well. I was a mess. And so I really was thankful to be able to be in a world where people could help me one-on-one. And I had teachers that sat down with me and said, you have a really good work ethic. Well, nobody has ever told me that before. Like professor, I didn't even like the class, but he had made a bunch of notes on something, and I went in and I asked him, and I was like writing it with him, and he said, you have a really good work ethic. Well, okay, that's one of the first times that somebody has said, you are a good student, not you should be a good student. And so that really stuck with me. And then when I went on to grad school, one of my professors, in grad school, things aren't quite as large. I was at UK, um, but it was a smaller cohort. And one of my professors said, "Has anybody ever talked to you about getting tested for ADD?" And I'm like, "Well, no. Why would they? Only boys. Even at that age, we're talking. I was 22. In my mind, even with my mental health progress that I was making, I still thought only boys had ADHD because I didn't have ADHD. I had ADD. So I make it through grad school with some help. I'm reading the books, Driven to Distraction and all of those books that, you're supposed to read. And I'm learning things about time management skills. And I'm trying to talk to my family about it. And we have ADHD rampant in our family. I mean, like my cousins, I have a set of 3 cousins that are boys that are my aunt's kids. They're like test subjects. They were test subjects at the UK ADHD clinic. I mean, like the genetics are there, but nobody ever, because they weren't overt, and hyperactivity wasn't ever a part of my symptoms, nobody looked at it until one of my professors in college said, you might want to, because I was explaining to her why I was struggling. And it was like a light bulb went on. So I do that, go on, I go to work for ACTC. Well, I mean, I did a bunch of stuff, but I'm at ACTC, and these I start to take some classes, um, because I got a specialization in autism spectrum disorders, and I got a specialization in clinical psychology. And one of the clinical psychology classes I took was called Gifted and Learning. Because I thought it sounded interesting. I was supposed to be gifted. Obviously, I'm not. Let's look and see what this is all about. And so it's the first time I'd ever heard the term twice exceptional. So twice exceptional means you are gifted. You have been tested, gifted, and talented, but you also have a disability. And now disabilities range from physical to mental health disabilities, and now we recognize ADD as something that needs to be accommodated in the schools, but even now girls are diagnosed significantly less. And so what happens is that, and I'll talk about this in my research, but the gifted label overrides everything else. So nobody looked for anything to explain why I was struggling other than what I considered an innate personality flaw. Now, is that the message my parents wanted to give me? No, it wasn't. But that was the message. That was what they were told was going on by my doctor. Dr. Schnickschker, if anybody remembers him, that man always gave me a shot. I hated to go see him, but he was, I did not like him as a doctor. So I'm really learning, and I'm getting into this, and I'm starting to put together the pieces of, okay, so I really did struggle. This wasn't something that I've made up. I really did struggle, and this is why I struggled. So I'm really starting to gather some information and trying to understand how I've gotten to where I am, which I'm telling you is just out of sheer grit and determination and, a little bit of attitude, because I don't like to be told that I'm something I don't want to be or I can't do something. And I'm telling you, that's gotten me further in life than it should have, but it has served me well. Last night, my husband and I were talking about something, maybe a cruise, and he said something about, well, you're not going to Mexico. Now, of course, if you guys watch the news, they're talking about these 4 people who just got kidnapped, 2 of them were killed. And I'm like, you didn't tell me I couldn't go to Mexico. He said, no, I didn't say that. I'm like, even if I don't want to go, I don't want you to tell me that I can't go. So I'm working at ACTC. I'm taking these classes. Now, up until this point, I've always kind of felt like I'm doing okay. Like I'm making my way, but I'm doing a really good job of fooling everybody in my world to make them think that I know what I'm talking about. Everybody. Any job I've ever had, that I have just charmed them and stayed under the radar enough to make them think that I'm doing okay. And then I worked with a woman who's my age, to back up. Both of my mom and my mother-in-law both worked at ACTC. My mother was a professor of kinesiology, and my mother-in-law was all kinds of administration stuff. And so one time, once my colleague, actually my supervisor, said to me, well, the only reason you're here is because your mom and your mother-in-law work here. I was floored. I'm like, okay, so then I'm learning about the concept of imposter syndrome, like this whole feeling of I'm working really, really hard, but the only reason that I've gotten anywhere is because other people have felt sorry for me or paved the way for me or and so when I applied for the job at OU, she's like, you're not going to get it. I mean, now this is a colleague. I was really shocked. And because I think she felt like if I didn't have somebody there, I knew nobody. I knew Kelly Hall and Debbie Marinsky because we were on a tri-state leadership team together. It's the only reason I knew them. Um, and so she said, you won't be happy there because there's nobody there to help you. I'm like, when have I ever asked for help? So this whole time I'm getting this one narrative that yeah, I look successful, but it's because other people are. And I'm doing my best and trying to reconcile the fact that I have really just snowed everybody in my life. That's syndrome. But until the last maybe 10 years that I had the language for that. So, I come out and I'm happy. I seem to be doing okay. I'm like having to meet new people. I hid in my office for a while because I didn't have any friends, and I was kind of okay with that after my experience at ACTC. I mean, now I have a family at OU that I would never want to leave. I'm very, very happy there, very happy, and I think I'm doing okay. But I still have these thoughts that the only reason I am moving forward or doing anything is because there are people behind me that are paving the way, that are feeding my name to other people, or because I really still have that, I'm just going to fly under the radar. Like, I don't want to make waves, because if I get put into a position where it's over my head and I don't have anybody to help me, then I'm going to fail and everybody's going to know that I'm a fraud. And I still have that. Now, objectively, people look at me, I think people look at me and think, she's okay. She's kind of got it together. I walk around fully aware that I'm a hot mess all the time. Now, I know that that's not true, but I have never, I am kind of a mess. Aren't we all a little bit of a mess? But I still cannot get past that early narrative that as an undiagnosed, gifted ADD kid, that my perception of myself, my identity became one of imposter syndrome. And so that's what I'd never read anything about this before. I'd read about imposter syndrome, that whole Twice Exceptional, the class I took on gifted and teaching, gifted and learning, gifted and talented, changed my life. Like, I remember I was sitting at the baseball field with my son, watching him play baseball. And can you guys hear me? Everybody looks frozen. Okay.
We can hear you.
And I was reading that chapter, and I looked up and I thought, okay, I have to read that again. So I read the whole chapter again, and it was, I'm telling you, if I've ever had a light bulb moment, that was it. And so that was sort of the catalyst for, now I'll be honest, I didn't want to start my dissertation until both of my kids were in college, but Nicole Pennington sort of pushed me in that direction, and I'm glad she did. But that sort of became, nobody else has done this. And how many people are out there who have not been diagnosed and have had this same narrative? Well, it turns out there's an awful lot. So, I have a lot to say, but I would like to share my research with you. So I thought maybe if we stop and you guys ask questions, or I could kind of pull up, I have a kind of a wonky PowerPoint to share. Because I was trying to get, it's my dissertation proposal PowerPoint, so I was trying to fix it so it wasn't so clunky, but I just gave up because PowerPoint wanted to make everything pretty and it was just screwing everything up. So do you guys have any questions or comments? Now, let me first say, I don't say any of this for sympathy. I don't. I really don't. Because, I've shared this with some people and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry you felt that way. It tears my mom to pieces. And when my dad's had a couple of glasses of wine, he'll say something like, yeah, I know we were terrible parents. And so I'm like, this is not why I did this. I did this because, and I do not want to cause my parents pain, which is why I'm hoping that, I don't think my mom knows about this. I really intentionally didn't tell her. But I'm not looking for sympathy. I did not have a bad childhood. I had, I think, a pretty normal childhood, a pretty privileged childhood. Even though there were times that we didn't have a lot of money, I had all my needs met. So I don't say this because I want sympathy. I say this because I want to share this experience to maybe help other people figure out how they deal with these feelings of, am I ever going to be good enough? So does anybody have comments or questions or similar experiences? Am I allowed to do that, Robert? I know this is my
Yes,
speech, but okay.
yeah, I'm glad you're doing that now because there may be some questions that you may have. I do want you to you brought up and you brought your example up of imposter syndrome. Can you give a definition of that,
Yeah.
so that people can relate
So,
that to what?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and pull up my PowerPoint because that is something I put on there. Is that
Okay.
okay?
Yeah, I think that would be
Because
great.
I thought that I wanted to make sure that some of the terms, everybody understood some of the terms. See, I was still working on it when I decided just to give up, so and make it look. Let me go back to the beginning.
Your example was perfect with your, but I think having a definition to work with would be good for some folks.
Okay, so here's my story. So a couple of definitions. First of all, twice exceptional is a fairly new term. It was coined in the late 70s, but there have been examples of gifted children with disabilities since the early 1900s, probably before that. But the earliest thing I could find documented was 1923. But twice exceptional is a person who's been labeled or tested as gifted and talented, but also has a disability. Now, where we're finding the disconnect is that there are a lot of people that are diagnosed with, or that are either diagnosed with a disability, lots of times learning disabilities or mental health issues. I mean, the physical disabilities are easier to see, but what I found with my research, it was that the mental health issues are the ones that really damaged kids because those were often overlooked. So I was an undiagnosed gifted kid. But then there are kids, especially now as we know more about mental health issues and anxiety and depression and things like that in kids, we are getting more kids that are now labeled what we would consider a true twice exceptional as diagnosed in the classroom. The problem is schools are not set up to deal with the giftedness and the disability. So these kids often end up in one track or the other. And so if they're undiagnosed, they're going to end up in the gifted track like I was. But they're going to be given that same narrative that I was, that why aren't you excelling? You're supposed to be really smart. So that's twice exceptional. Imposter syndrome was coined by two women, Clance and Imes, in the 60s. And basically the definition was high achieving individuals who attribute their success to outside forces or influences. So if you think about how I feel, like, I've always felt like the only reason I've been successful is because there are people that are behind me, pushing me or doing for me behind the scenes, or that had they not been there, I would not be nearly as successful as I am today. And, I tell my students that I'm going to drag them to graduation by their toenails, just sort of as joking, but really, I know that they have to do the work. The problem is with imposter syndrome, I can't always differentiate between healthy support and what imposter syndrome says is enabling or doing something for me. Even though I can rationally, if you told me my story without as somebody else's story, I would probably look at it very differently. But when you look at the experiences I had over the years, the identity that I developed because of what happened in grade school, and until really grad school, really helped form the identity that I have today as somebody who is not competent. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So I'm gonna stop sharing that now. But does anybody have any questions or comments or stories of things that they've experienced or their kids have experienced?
Anyone
No?
want questions for Joy?
I just didn't
Okay,
want to go
well,
first, but so I will ask a question. What are some things that you recommend for someone who is dealing with maybe undiagnosed imposter syndrome? Because I just personally, I completely believe anything that I am successful at is because of someone else's ability to do more than I did. So but I was also taught you don't brag on yourself or put yourself on a pedestal of any sort. and you always provide talk about the success because of your team. So what are some things that you may recommend for someone who might be struggling with that?
Well, first of all, we're gonna if I'm gonna show you some slides in a minute that talk a little bit more about that. But the thing I think needs to happen the most is that people don't talk about imposter syndrome because they don't want anybody to know, they don't want to be found out. We're afraid that if we talk about it, somebody's going to say, they're going to start looking at, you know what, Joy, she really didn't do a good job. I thought she did, but now that I look at it, we're afraid people are going to look at us differently or start watching us differently. But I am willing to bet that now there's not a lot of great information on imposter syndrome out there. There is some newer research in the last 10 years about imposter syndrome in higher education, because in any high achieving profession. And one of the things that everybody suggests is that we get rid of the stigma, because nobody talks about it, because nobody wants to be identified as somebody who is underachieving, which is what we think we're doing. So by doing this is a big deal. What if Robert starts looking at my work a little more closely and realizes that I'm not nearly as good as he thinks I am? Or, Dr. Marinsky says, you know what, I'm good. Let me look at her. We just don't want people to, we like the facade. We like the mess. So I think the first thing that we do is we start talking about it. The second thing is, I think everybody needs to go to therapy. I love my therapist. I have to find a new one, and I'm dragging it because I really liked my old one. But I think therapy is, it is the best way for somebody with imposter syndrome to look at a situation completely unbiased. Because if you're talking to your friend, they're going to tell you you're wonderful. Even if you're not, they're going to tell you you're wonderful. And so therapy is a really great way, a really great safe space for somebody to sit and work through their feelings with somebody who is trained to be unbiased, to help kind of pull out where those feelings came from. Had I gone to therapy a long time ago, I probably would have figured this out a long time ago. But I didn't figure this out until probably 10 years ago. And I'm 47. So those are the two biggest things that I recommend. The other thing is, we got to start getting the kids in grade school. Now, I know that doesn't help you as an adult working, but if we don't start identifying kids and accommodating them appropriately before, and I'll explain my theory in a second, but before we start to kind of crystallize our belief in who we are and what we can do, if we get to them before that. Now, I'm not saying that every kid needs a trophy. I've never been that mom. I don't think every kid needs a trophy. But I think every kid can be recognized for the things that they do well. Maybe it's not running the bases at a baseball game, but maybe it's cheering the kids on. But I think that we, as a school system, and I'm not an education major or anything like that, but we've got to start recognizing what these kids need in the classroom. And it's really hard because parents are working, and so they're just going on what their teachers say. We see things in our kids, but we don't know what to do with them. So, and if kids are making it through, sometimes that's okay. We're just gonna let them go along instead of, I was told for years that I was lazy. So, it wasn't until I was in college that one professor, first time I was 18 years old before somebody told me I had a good work ethic. So, so those are three things, but talk about it and go to therapy. Everybody needs a therapist.
Joy, you mentioned one of your comments, and you can share or not share, just whatever you'd like to do with this question. But you had mentioned that your daughter, she is the best of the worst parts of me. That quote that and I don't know if I got that exactly right. So
yeah, probably, yeah.
Did that cause conflict because of things you were working through, and then she's a different, she's outgoing, she's all these other things? Did that cause any kind of conflict between?
Well, and so I may not have put that right, because my daughter is I wish I could be her. She is confident. She is ridiculolously smart. Calculus 2 is her easy class right now. She's like, I took a test last night, got a 99. It's only because she's just, She didn't even study for it because she was studying for a mechanic. Like, so she has the work ethic, but she has the anxiety that I have. But I mean, she got the stuff that I think I wish I had, like the support, because I knew how I felt growing up. And I didn't want her to feel that way. So I've always been really intentional about telling my kids what they do well, really intentional about that. But she has that innate work ethic. She doesn't have, I think she's got ADD, but I don't think that distractibility is what gets her. She's more of the impulse. And so I think she got the language of things she needed to work through or struggle with or be supported with long before I did, only because her mama had been through it. So, and the kid's rocking it at UK. She's like ruining the curve for everybody. I'm really proud of her. But she also has the worst of the anxiety, that I have. And, sort of, I don't think she's got the imposter syndrome, but she definitely has I should be doing more. But she has better self-esteem than anybody I know. Even going into college, she knows who she is. She likes who she is. And my biggest fear as a mom is that I'm not seeing something that's maybe underlying that, because she does have so much anxiety. But no, I think she was raised with a different narrative because I lived that life. So I saw it, and can deal with it at home, I think.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before Joy continues? Or comments?
I had another one because I know you mentioned that. I know you said you're in social work, not in education, as far as like the elementary school education or anything like that. But going back to our Envision Access speaker with Moisey, and she mentioned that our twice exceptional students, using the language that you mentioned, are the ones who are going to be the ones who succeed and find ways to solve problems that other people may not be able to. So with that, in your research, did you identify, because you also mentioned trying to identify children earlier and earlier, so that way we can create that connection of support around those students who may experience that. In your research, did you have an idea of what something like that may look like to support those students?
Yeah. And when I did some research, when I did my interviews, I had a lot of people share things that like I never knew existed, because I live in Ashland, Kentucky, and we didn't necessarily have the same types of programs. But so I think they were talking specifically about neurodivergent people who think differently, like people with ADD and autism and maybe learning struggles. And so the behind that, I think what we as a society have to remember is that just because you're not what's considered neurotypical doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It just means that we see things differently. And so one of the things that I came across is that some of my participants that I did interviews with lived in more metropolitan areas. And they had programs that were fully immersive, maybe 1 or 2 days a week, with things that the kids really loved, like physics or music, or, I mean, and we know that music and math are intricately connected. And so they might have, I would go to a trailer behind Crab Elementary and sit all day and do whatever it is the teachers wanted us to do. And then I'd come home and I had no idea what I was doing. Like, nobody ever asked me if I needed help with my homework, because it was just assumed that I could do my homework. So I would do what I knew how to do, and then I'd go back and, but these fully immersive programs that really develop a kid's interests, physics, history, I mean, letting them really kind of have it is, and if you look at the research now, this is not what I focused my research on, but if you look at research now, kids who are identified with the trouble with things like skills and get into those programs really excel. We don't have a lot of those around here. Like, we might have a STEM school, and I don't even know about performing arts. I don't know what we've got around here. Maybe something in Huntington, but we don't really have sort of immersive programs that cater to the specific interest of kids who are gifted. And when you have smaller cohorts like that, then you can attend to or maybe see more easily what are some of the skills the kids have. My best friend, one of my best friends, her name is Christy. Her daughter was going to Oakview, really as a lawyer, once an, Christy's an epidemiologist, and they couldn't figure it out because, she's a single kid in a home where parents worked with her all the time. So they pulled her out and took her to Holy Family. And within 6 weeks, they said, we think she has dyslexia. So she was tested and she got all the supports that she needed. And now she's back at Blazer because she wants to play soccer. So she's in high school now. But when you have those smaller groups too, it's so much easier to see the struggle of one kid. In our school systems right now, we've got 30 kids in a classroom with maybe one aide and one teacher. And what if 8 of those kids have IEPs and the other 10 more have 504s? I can't even begin to understand how they even get to the end of the day and get content in, much less pay attention to all of the special things that need to be done to have an appropriate educational experience for that kid. Did that answer your question, or did I go like way off topic?
No, you're good. It makes sense. In a smaller group, you're going to be able to identify students a little easier, and then surround them with additional resources, like you were mentioning there.
Yeah, but those immersive programs, I think some of the people that I've talked to, like they talked about those that was the best thing that ever happened to them. They were with their people. That was sort of, like my daughter, talking about my daughter, she's living in the Learning Living dorm for the engineering students at UK. So the entire dorm is engineering students, and she found her people. There's only like 10 girls too, so in the freshman class. So she's got 3 or 4 girls that she's super great friends with. I mean, and they're all study, she has found her people. They are as driven as she is. And that's what we see I think a gifted pull-out program for one day is a good idea if you can't do other stuff. When you look at what kids say about, especially neurodivergent kids who maybe struggle with social skills, or anything else, especially being bullied in school, if you can pull them out and put them with people who are minded in bigger cities, it changes the trajectory for those kids. And it really, we don't all have the same resources. So, I mean, if I could like read and write all day long, I would have been so happy. So happy. Or I loved science, not so much math. This is why I'm not sure where my daughter came from. So, all right. Any other questions before I'm going to share results of my research?
Hi, Joy. I just want to say I'm excited to see your research, so I want you to definitely get to that. But your statement that everybody needs therapy, I actually, when I gave my IM, I said the same thing, because like I was in it when I first started in it, it was out of necessity and trauma. But then, now I do it as kind of like maintenance. I make sure that I go, but I think everybody could benefit from it. So I like that you're taking that stand. And then I was on the opposite side of the spectrum. So I was considered to be highly intelligent, but I was also pulled out of class once a week because into a remedial class. And then I actually have some dyslexia, and the one where you transfer numbers, and I don't remember the actual term for it, but yeah, so that was kind of tough. Yes. And so I was pulled out too, because I was a child in the 80s, and that's just what you did. If you're different, you don't fit that status norm right there,
Yeah.
then you have to go somewhere, whether you're too smart or whether you're not, whatever is going on. But then I was like in I was in the remedial class, like helping all the other students do their stuff, because they gave me a role to like, go around and help them. But they would also give me like headphones to listen to do all my tests while I'm an auditory learner. So guess what? I was killing it in the remedial class because I didn't have to like read it. So there was just so many things that people just didn't know. And I think it's great that you're taking a stand. It is hard. When I did my IM, I did not want to talk about a lot of things because I'm still in the community with people. I don't want my mom to be upset. Exactly the same thing. But, trying to
Mhm.
make the path better for other people, that's what you're doing. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks. And you said something that made me want to say something, but I can't remember what it was. I'll think about it and maybe I'll think about it in a minute. But you said something that I wanted to expand on, but I can't remember what it was. Okay, I'm gonna share I'm gonna start with, just so you understand the theory behind what I did. I think most of you guys have probably heard of Eric Erickson. He does the psychosocial development model. And so because of course, when you're doing research, you have to ground it in theory. And so my research said that critical experiences in stages 4, 5, and 7, which I'll tell you what those are in a minute, those experiences contributed to the long-term identity of imposter syndrome. And so they're just some things you don't need to, we're not going to go over all of this. So I ended up with 3 research questions. Well, so let me go. Okay, so stage 4 is competence. And so stage 4 is like early childhood and grade school. So competence is, competence versus inferiority, meaning you either decide that you know how to do something or you don't based on your experiences. And so when you're a gifted kid with a disability and they keep telling you should be able to do this, why can't you? My competence identity, my psychosocial development was that I wasn't competent. So then stage 5 is identity. It's, role taking. Think about high schoolers, how we're all trying to figure out who we are. And so the identity solidified in high school and college because nothing changed. So my identity became somebody who was incompetent, yet I was still succeeding. So then fast forward to stage 7, which is adulthood, which is really, it's generativity versus stagnation, which basically means you are either you're producing, you're giving to your family, or you're not, and you're happy with whichever one that you're doing. And so that imposter syndrome sort of lies in that stagnation. And there's sort of the juxtaposition though of you are succeeding, but internally you feel like. And so those are the stages I focused on things that happened that created this imposter syndrome identity. So I had 3 research questions. One is how do post-secondary faculty describe their twice exceptional educational experiences? And I came out with 2 themes for each of my, 5 themes total, 2 for research question 1 and 2. And the first theme, because I was gifted. Because I heard over and over and over in my interviews that because I was gifted, people didn't pay attention to the other things that I was struggling with. This quote here, I think that's the challenge of the gifted label, because it's like you're one of the good kids. There's nothing to worry about here. And I cannot tell you, every made that same statement, a variation of that same statement throughout my entire research. And it was one of the biggest things that came out of this was because I was gifted, wrong. And then theme 2 about their twice exceptional experiences is that external interactions become inner monologues. So we believe what people are saying about us. So this quote here, I quickly learned that if my teachers saw me as a social person, then that was the role I would play. And that's the way I would play in the classroom forever. So I was a teacher's pet in the sense that I would instead try and build relationships with my teachers and build relationships with my classmates. And what this person goes on to say is that she was so charming, which you see in people with imposter syndrome, that she felt like she was doing what people wanted to see. So they didn't see the struggles that she was having. She was able to kind of gloss over that and almost manipulate her situation could be successful. And because this particular person was an excellent athlete, very gregarious. I mean, talking to her, we had the best time. I think we talked for 2 or 3 hours, which was a really long interview to transcribe. But so she talks about how everything she heard though became, so when you hear I'm lazy, when you hear you're lazy, or if you could just apply yourself, that becomes your inner monologue because you're not stuff. So with this particular individual, she said, oh, she's just a social butterfly. What it was is she had ADD. It wasn't, I mean, yeah, she was social, but she was really she couldn't focus on anything, or she was focusing on everything. I do these results, I'll click off of this and show you, and we'll talk about them. So the second question was, how do post-secondary faculty describe their experiences with imposter syndrome during their educational journey and in their professional lives? So theme one is I accommodate for my environment. The quote I have is, I guess that's the way I accommodate people like my dean, who are in positions of power, have some degree of authority, and I use their authority to do my work. I think it's safe for me. It allows me to do work and make a difference and influence, while at some point not being entirely responsible for the outcome. Someone else is responsible. And then theme two, imposter syndrome over. And so my superstar next to you, and you're like, I'm not as good as you. But you might say, that's when you say, maybe I'm lazy. But yeah, I was tired last night and I should have been writing a paper, but I was tired because I was playing soccer with my son. So when you break both of these down, theme one is that people with imposter syndrome often have had it for a very long time, stemming from sort of those narratives in childhood, and they have learned to navigate their environment in a way that works for them. That doesn't mean they're not going to be super successful. This female number 5 is a super successful person, but been put in charge of things that puts this in the spotlight. But she does not want to take the lead position because she wants to stay under the radar if she chooses to. And the second one is, I think I should be better, but I'm hanging out with my family, but I still, like, it's always that, what should I have done? I know I did this well, but what? But what if? What if I had worked harder? What if I had made this choice? What if I had studied for this instead of playing soccer with my son? And then the third research question, what are perceptions on how their early twice exceptional experiences contributed to their feelings of imposter syndrome? And everybody was very clear. They felt like imposter syndrome, their identity began in grade school. And so this quote is, maybe, and now that we know, and it's kind of what everybody said, now that we know, maybe it's feasible that maybe that is 100% possible that given the right treatment and treatment plan, maybe not even medical intervention, but maybe behavioral intervention would have been enough to keep those skills up. And then I wouldn't feel so behind today. This particular individual is a rock star in her field, but hours prepping for every class that she teaches because she's afraid somebody's going to ask her a question that she doesn't know the answer to. And so, I mean, it permeates so many different facets of our personality. So when you go back and you look at that progression of identity development, that competence versus incompetence, and then the identity development, and then all the way into the stagnation and generativity. It starts there, that perception that we're incompetent, especially when we're told, is something that, can you guys hear me? My internet seems to be doing funny things. Can you hear me, Robert?
Well, I can hear you now. You were going in and out there. You've been going in and out, but
okay.
You.
But that identity, that perception of competence, of incompetence, despite the fact we're told we should be competent because of that gifted level, is, like, I think my research shows, is very clearly connected to what I feel today in the way that people with imposter syndrome feel. And it's not connected exclusively to 2E kids. That just happens to be my story. So, research, you don't want to make it too big. So, I mean, when I first proposed this, I don't think I told a whole lot of people that this was sort of my story. I'm afraid they wouldn't have let me do it because I would have been too close to it. And so I think that, I mean, I definitely believe that there are many paths to imposter syndrome, but I do think a lot of it starts in the school environment. As we're learning who we are, that external feedback becomes our inner monologue. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I took away. So, and that's about all I have to say on that. So what kind of questions do you guys have?
Are there questions or comments for Joy? We have a few more minutes. Joy, if you wanted to stop sharing, I think we're.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
There we go. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Okay, something else I've written down that I didn't share. I didn't start medication for ADD until maybe about 10 years ago. So I made it through grad school. I made it through all those other classes that taught the concept of ADHD meds until I saw it so vividly in my son, and we were, so we both sort of went on them together. So dissertation is very much powered by Focalin.
I have two questions. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yes.
This
Hi,
is
Betty
Betty George.
Yeah.
So how did you choose your subjects for the dissertation?
So I wish I'd done a little bit differently, but what I did, so post-secondary faculty is who I chose because that's me and that's sort of who I'm studying. But I've narrowed the field to anybody who was a post-secondary faculty member at Ohio University, just because that was one sort of captured population. And it was really interesting, though. I had two people that were international that I interviewed, one from Europe and one from South America. I had people that I really only had one person out of all my subjects who grew up in Ohio. The rest of them were from, like, one person was from Maine. And so I thought that was kind of interesting and it was self-selected. So, you have to go through the IRB process, which takes forever and a day. And then I sent out, the Office of Research and Compliance sends out a call for participants. And I got about 15, only 8 of them were appropriate for interviewing for various reasons. So I had 8 people that I interviewed total.
I don't know how to ask this next question. So when someone's diagnosed as a child, is the first solution to medicate or
No.
to teach them coping skills?
I think it's
Or
different
something
for
else?
every kid, but yeah, no, I mean, the first solution is, I don't believe the first solution is ever to medicate. Now, I'm not against medication by any means. I can say flippantly things like better living through chemistry, but I mean, I just don't think that it's true for. We did a lot of things with my son. We did the Feingold diet, which basically you take out all of these things that are supposed to trigger ADD. Like, we were driving to Lexington every 2 weeks to go to Whole Foods so we could buy stuff that was free of red dye 40 and BHT. And so if you ever look up the Feingold diet, FEINGOLD, we did that for a while and it worked some. But you know what? This little boy is going to eat a red cookie if somebody gives it to him. And so, it didn't always work. And so it became a question of quality of life for him. He was getting labeled. And I'm not saying he was a handful. He's still a handful, but he's a great kid. But it got to the point that they couldn't see beyond that. He was a smart kid, a super smart kid. But just as the gifted label overrode a lot of things for the people that I researched, so they didn't look further. They were just looking at the fact that the kid couldn't sit in a seat, and had impulse issues. And so, after a while, we actually found a child psychiatrist in Wilder, Kentucky. So we drove back and forth, it's right there on the edge of northern Kentucky. And that's when we kind of made the decision as a family. And Daniel had a choice. So, but he stopped taking it. He doesn't take it now. But he did take it. It did really help him at least get through high school. And then he had a choice. He has it. He still gets it filled. He still don't take it. I think behavioral interventions often. Okay, so this is my somewhat informed but not totally probably accurate opinion. I think that the kids that are diagnosed with ADD and ADHD that don't truly have that diagnosis, I think that trauma can mimic ADHD and ADD symptoms. I also think that very, very permissive parenting can lead to that kind of stuff. So sometimes I think that having a conversation with the parents or the guardians and the teachers and the kid, especially if they're younger, once they get to middle school, I think it's really hard to correct some of that stuff. But I think making sure their diagnosis is correct and kind of course, that's a short perspective. We're looking at their environment. I think looking to see what their environment's like is one of the first steps also. I never think medication's the first response. That was a really long answer to your question, but I do think it's very important and it should be an option, just to make the first option.
Any other questions or comments?
I do. Hi, it's Rob Joy.
Hey, Rob.
So as an adult, somebody that has been as successful as you have been, do you still find yourself struggling with ADD? Like, do you still do the therapy? I don't know, medication. You don't have to talk about that. I know that's personal.
No, I'll share.
But it's been suggested that I also.
Yeah, I still take Focalin.
Okay.
I take it every morning.
Okay, yeah, because it's been suggested that I'm.
I mean,
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I will stop talking until I know you're
okay. Now, because it's been suggested, like I've seen therapists, and because I work in the role I do, I think they feel kind of intimidated that I have the coping skills to deal with the things that I deal with. But it has been suggested I might have ADD, so I don't know what the process with getting tested for that would be like. At 42 years old, it's kind of hard to talk about stuff like that.
It is, but I would encourage you. I mean, you're going to go see a psychiatrist who specializes in adult mental health issues, and they should be able to. I mean, there's tests. There's lots of things that they're going to ask. When you're a kid, they ask the people in your world, like your teachers. There's all these forms you have to fill out. But an adult, so it's a little bit of a different process. I still take medication. I take it every day. On days that I don't, you can tell. I can tell. But I also have a lot of coping skills, whether that be running on the treadmill or walking outside, or like today I went to the Y and did weights. That's something that I do. I also am trying really hard to be mindful about to be productive. Like, man, I'm all about watching Criminal Minds for 2-3 hours if I can, but I hard to recognize those cues that I'm getting off track. Sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes it doesn't happen so quickly. But yeah, I mean, this is something I'm going to deal with for the rest of my life.
Yeah, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Joy, I want to thank you for sharing your story, your journey. I do think that, I don't know if you shared your research with teachers in the area or anything like that, or shared any of your findings. I think that would be great. So maybe that's something we could work on as a presentation here on campus, and invite local educators to be part of that conversation. So just a thought.
Mm-hmm.
So I can always find something else for you to just,
I know you can. I know that, yeah.
But I do want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you for being a part of our I Am Speaker series. And Joy, thank you again. So if you have any questions, feel free to email Joy. I'm sure she'll be glad to answer any questions by email if you want to talk to her personally, whatever it may be.
Absolutely.
But thank you all for being a part of it. Take care.